Hey guys, it's Cheryl from Woodshop Diaries, and lately I've been getting a lot of requests for a simple bookshelf build. I dug through a lot of my old projects and plans, and I realized that while I have several unique styles of bookshelves that I've built in the past, I don't have just your basic, simple, standard bookshelf design. So I thought that would be a great addition to the channel. In this video, I'll be sharing how I built this classic, standard, simple bookshelf that's easy to customize to whatever size that you need. To add some extra character, I added these fun little faux metal railings, and I'll show you how I did that at the end of the video, but you can build this bookshelf with or without the railings. So if you're ready to dive in and get building, let's go. This video is sponsored by my friends at Shopify. Later in the video, I'll share how Shopify helps power my small business and can help you with yours too. But for now, let's head to the shop. This project, like many others, started out by cutting down the plywood. I'm not normally a fan of red oak, but for this project, I felt like it was fitting. And I also had a few leftover boards and some scrap plywood that I was trying to get rid of. I made the bookshelf body from 3/4 inch plywood, and I used 1/2 inch plywood on the back. I also used solid 1x lumber for the face frame, but we will cover all of that when we get there. First, I ripped my 3/4 inch plywood into strips for the sides, top, dividers, and bottom pieces. So the way that I've designed this bookshelf, it's got a 1/2 inch sheet of plywood for the backer. Normally when I do backers on furniture projects, I use a 1/4 inch plywood panel. In this case, I'm using 1/2 inch because I want to fake some shiplap on the back. So I'm gonna cut like some shallow slits down the board. That way it looks like the back is like boards next to each other, if that makes sense. I designed my bookshelf so that I wouldn't have to cut any off of the width of this back panel, but I did need to cut it a little off the bottom because the bookshelf was only going to be about 80 inches tall. All right, now I need to cut my slits, and I just want to barely cut into the wood. So I'm gonna cut my slats to be 4 inches wide. So I'm just gonna set on my rip cut, I'm gonna set 4 inches. I'm gonna run it down one side, then the other, then 8, run it down one side, then the other, and all the way up until I get to wherever I get to. Now I was ready to start putting the pieces together, but first I sanded everything well. It's always so much easier to sand everything before assembling than it is after the fact. I drilled pocket holes into the top piece and the bottom shelves to assemble. So I've got the back panel here, and it's going to attach between the side panels with pocket holes. These will be on the back side, obviously. That's why I have it flipped upside down. I'm going to drill the pocket holes on the back. I have the Craig micro pocket hole jig. I have mentioned this like 100 times before, but it's for drilling into thinner material. It drills like 30% smaller holes or something, and you use it with smaller pan head screws. So since this is 1/2 inch thick, I'm going to use the smaller jig to make the smaller holes and use the smaller screws. That's not necessary. You can use the standard size jig, but since I have this, I'm going to use it because I really kind of love this thing. I work my way around the plywood back panel, drilling pocket holes along the sides and the top. I assembled the shelf on the floor because it was just too big for the workbench, and it would have been difficult to move around. I attached the top to one side panel first, then I added the back panel before attaching the other side. I had to remember to use 1 inch pocket hole screws for attaching the back panel and 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws for everything else. Once the sides and back were together, I added the vertical divider pieces. I used the bottom shelves as spacers to help me attach these to the top panel. Then I installed these shelves at the bottom so that the top of each shelf was about 5¼ inches from the bottom. So now I need to cut the bottom middle shelf, and the reason why I didn't cut this before now is because I really need to cut this to fit. I knew roughly what it was going to be, but since the plywood thickness is never like exactly 3/4, and I didn't have a lot of wiggle room here with the back panel already being in place, I thought it was best to just put the two sides in and then cut to fit this middle piece. I measured and carefully cut the middle shelf to fit. Then I secured it with screws. At this point, I still need to attach the back panel to the dividers, but I wanted to add the shelves first so that I didn't accidentally secure the dividers in like a weird bowed position. I cut most of my shelves from smaller scraps that I was wanting to get rid of. But don't worry, if you're not working with scraps, I've got you covered with the complete cut diagrams from full sheets of plywood in the printable plans that I've linked below. The front edges of these shelves will be exposed, so I applied edge banding before drilling pocket holes to install. I don't normally install stationary shelves in my projects. I usually like the option of being able to adjust them. However, for this particular project, I designed it so that the shelves didn't move and they were evenly spaced top to bottom. To keep my shelf spacing even, I used a piece of scrap plywood as a spacer. Also, side note, I ran out of scraps and I still needed to make 2 more shelves. I ended up having to borrow some from a friend who happened to have a little scrap in his shop, so we will revisit this shortly to finish up these last 2 shelves. For now, I moved on to building the face frame. I use 1x2s for the vertical parts of the frame and 1x6s for the top and bottom. I've gotten a lot of questions lately from people about starting or growing a woodworking business. So I'm excited to be partnering with Shopify to share a little about how they've helped me in my own entrepreneurial journey. Shopify is a commerce platform that powers millions of businesses all over the world, including my own. One of the reasons that I personally chose Shopify when I decided to start selling and managing my own products was because it was so easy to set up my shop with their drag and drop editor. I could easily add my products, organize my homepage, and get started without having to hire a developer or do any complicated coding. Once everything was set up, I could connect it to my social media accounts and integrate my shop with my existing platforms like here on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Pinterest. Shopify allows you to sell both digital and physical products, both online and in person. So no matter what kind of woodworking business you're looking to start or grow, Shopify can help you get started. Kickstart your business or your side hustle today with a free trial of Shopify. Scan the QR code or head to shopify.com/woodshopdiaries to get started. By the way, if you want to see how Shopify integrates with YouTube, I've linked the building plans for this project, and you should see them right here below this video. Speaking of project plans, let's continue with the build. Once the face frame was together, I came back and added those last 2 shelves before gluing and nailing it onto the front. At this point, now that the shelves were all in, I came back and attached the back panel to the dividers with a few screws. The final part was adding some trim along the top and the bottom. This part is completely optional, but it does add a little extra dimension. Before staining, I put a little wood glue in the nail holes and sanded it while it was still wet. The sawdust kind of mixes with the glue and usually helps fill the holes. Then I applied Minwax weathered oak wood stain and followed up with Minwax polyacrylic to seal it. At this point, the bookshelf was finished. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this is your basic, classic, simple style bookshelf. Nothing fancy, but still really nice. And while I loved it as is, I had an idea that I just couldn't get out of my head.
So I wanted to try out something fun that would add a little extra detail.
So I saw these railings on a bookshelf online. I looked up how much it would cost to buy the metal ones like this, and for 5 shelves was gonna be about $1,000. And I thought there's no way I'm doing that. So I made them out of wood, and I made one here just to make sure it was gonna work before I made the other 4. I need 5 total.
So I've got a 1/2 inch dowel, and I'm going to set this stop block to 1/2 inch from the blade so I can cut 1/2 inch wide pieces of dowel. To make this railing, I used wooden balls and 1/2 inch diameter and 1/4 inch diameter wood dowel.
Okay, so full transparency, when I originally started to build this, I thought I was going to use a 3/8 inch dowel instead of a 1/4 inch dowel. So I bought wooden balls that had a 3/8 inch hole. Since I'm only going to be using 1/4 inch now, I need to fill this hole and then drill it out. So I've actually also cut a couple of 3/8 inch So I've cut a couple of 3/8 inch plugs here to stick in the holes so that I can drill out a 1/4 inch hole instead. If I were to do this over, I would buy wooden balls that had a 1/4 inch hole, but we're gonna make do. So I've got a 1/4 inch Forstner bit here. Definitely recommend using a Forstner bit. I tried drilling these holes with a drill bit and it just like shredded everything and then split all of the pieces. I need to drill holes through the center of these 1/2 inch dowels. I'm drilling a 1/4 inch hole, so I don't have a whole lot of wiggle room, but I'm gonna find the center, or close to the center. It's not gonna be exact, that's okay. Now I tried this before, trying to drill the hole all the way through with the clamp, and because of the pressure, once I get so far through, it's gonna just like crumple on itself. So I'm gonna start drilling the hole with the clamp, and then I'm gonna take it out and hold it with my finger. And then these go on the ends. Now I have to drill the holes to stick the pieces on the back that will actually go into the bookshelf. These are also 1/4 inch dowels. I cut them to about 1.25 inches long. I think probably I could have cut them a little shorter, but it is what it is. And I'm not gonna glue these in place just so that I can adjust them as needed when I get ready to install them. But for now, I've got the holes drilled. Again, not gonna glue these in place, just gonna stick this in for now. So before I drill the holes in these pieces, I need to space them so that center to center is about 12.5 inches. But while I get that close, since the ends are adjustable, I can kind of fiddle around with that a little bit. I need to make sure that the 2 middle pieces though are 23 inches. Center to center. Now I need to drill holes in the middle pieces just deep enough that I can glue these pieces in place. I want to make sure these 2 middle pieces, if I look down the line, that the little pegs coming out look pretty even. Straight up and down in line with each other. So I'm gonna let them dry.
I spray painted these railings in metallic spray paint and allowed to completely dry, and I made 5 of these total. Once I was ready to actually add these to the shelf, I laid them out and figured out about how far above each shelf that I wanted to go. I settled on 2 inches. I measured out and marked the holes on the center of each vertical part of the face frame, and before drilling, I made sure that these holes did in fact line up with the pegs on the rail. Then I drilled these out. Once the holes were drilled, I carefully tapped the railings in place. By the way, I did not glue these in. It's a pretty snug fit, so it's really not necessary. Not gluing them allows me to remove them later if needed, to replace if one gets broken, or if I simply change my mind and decide I don't want them anymore, or I want to paint them a different color, whatever. After all 5 rails were installed, I flipped the shelf back up and restaged it to take photos. Honestly, I love this shelf with or without the railings. Without them, it looks simple and classic, but with them, it looks a little bit more bold and unique. But I am a fan of black accents, especially against a nice wood piece. Either way, I hope you enjoyed seeing this simple shelf come together and watching me fake these metal rails. Thank you guys so much for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for plenty more projects to come soon. Until next time, friends, happy building!